everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I'm sharing with you my foolproof strategy for outlining a novel. So if you're new to my channel, hi, welcome. I'm Lucy and I'm a writer. Last year I got an agent for the first time for my writing, and I've really been working on my debut novel this past year, and also really working on learning more about the craft, making videos on my writing journey and how I write and things that I've learned so that I can share that with you guys as well. So whether you are an experienced writer, whether you have never written before and you have always wanted to write a novel, hopefully this video will be helpful in terms of how I personally outline. As someone who doesn't like to plan like a novel, I have never been a plotter and I really struggle to box myself in when I'm plotting. I prefer a very bare bones plan, but I'm going to give you guys some different outlining tools today that you can use no matter how you like to outline. So whether you do love going full-blown plotting every single thing that happens out in the book, or if you like, you know, kind of just knowing where you're going but like to fill in the blanks along the way. Hopefully this video will have something for everyone. So I am anticipating this video might be quite long, so do grab yourself a warm beverage and let's get cracking with the video. Before you start outlining a novel, say you've had a gem of an idea but you don't know where to start. This is where this puts your idea to the test. Is this an idea for a full-blown novel, or is this just kind of an idea that doesn't really lead anywhere? So my advice would be to find your winning idea. Now, that's easier said than done, I know. But before we do get on with my foolproof guide of outlining a novel, first, you need to make sure that you have got your winning idea. You want to pick an idea for a story that has legs. You don't want a story that is going to take you up to the midpoint and then quickly burn out and you kind of don't really know where it goes from there. I think you need to be picking an idea that gives you space and gives you room to write a whole novel around it. The most important thing though is that you are picking an idea that you are passionate about and excited about. So you need to be able to follow this idea all the way through. You can't be bored halfway and lose interest in it. I think that's the thing. So let your ideas stew and germinate for a little while before you actually put pen to paper, because you need to be thinking about that idea more than once. I think you really need to start thinking about the characters, about the setting, and I am going to come onto that as well. But I really would take some time to brainstorm your idea before you actually come to outlining the novel. Start imagining your idea in your head. Like, start listening to music that reminds you of it. Maybe it's watching films that give you a similar vibe to your idea. That's what I really did with the novel that I got my agent with. I was watching a lot of Regency period dramas, I was reading dark academia novels, and all of that was fueling my idea even more. Just the kind of atmosphere and the sense of it really helped to make me more excited about my idea. So let's quickly go into characters, because before you outline, you obviously need to know who your characters are. There are several ways to properly map out your character. I'm not really going to go into all the ways you can develop character into this video now, because this really is just about outlining. But outlining your characters is also really important, and you have to really know your characters. The key thing with characters is what motivates them. You have to have a motivation really for all of the main characters in your book. You know, what is it that they want above all else? Of course you have the main plot of your story, but your characters need to have their own arc as well. They need to start off from one place, they need to want to become something else or go somewhere else, and they need to end up in another place. So bear that in mind, their kind of journey, their arc. Like, what are they learning? What is going to test them? You know, you really have to think about your characters as their own kind of outlining as well. They need to like outline their journey. So I really would think about that. I've seen quite a few places where some people like to pretend they are interviewing their characters as they're kind of outlining their novel. So a good way to kind of get to know your characters, to really sense what makes them tick, is to maybe interview them, to kind of like get a sense of like what they would do in certain situations, what they would say, if they have certain mannerisms as well. Like, these aren't just like rigid characters who are just like speaking, you know, they have their own body language, their own mannerisms, their own ways of reacting to a situation based on their background. remember to make them as real as possible. And always think, what is driving my characters onwards? What is kind of motivating them to speed their way through your plot? You know, what is driving them forward? Always bear that in mind as well when you're thinking of character. Now, before you can start outlining as well, you have to think of your setting and also world building. This comes in as part of this as well. Whether you are crafting a fantasy, intricate world, or if you're building a more contemporary world that is like our kind of world that we know, it's good to get a sense of your setting. What time period is this set in? What city, what town, what time of year? You know, are we in the middle of autumn like we are now? Like, you know, what is it like there? What's the temperature? It's a lot easier to obviously write a novel in the real world if it kind of is more of a contemporary novel or even a historical novel. You obviously will have to do research for that, but it is slightly easier to ground it in the world that we know. Where it can be a little bit more challenging and you're gonna have to really rely on more world building is fantasy novels or sci-fi novels, any novel that is set in a world different from ours that you have kind of created out of your imagination. This is where you really have to work on your world building. My advice would to think micro and to think macro. So think micro of the small details. What does it smell like in the town that you created? Where do people buy their food from? Who do they live next to? Little tiny details that make up the map of this world. Then you can think macro. You know, what is the governing system? Who's in charge? What's the currency? What is the political story going on? You know, what religion do these people worship? Etc, etc. So you can think macro, but you can think micro. And honestly, I think that setting and world building really depends on the small details as well. So the small details, like the little things of like where people get their food or what music they listen to, that can help build a much bigger picture than you think. So now that you've got a sense of your characters, you've got a sense of your setting, you've got your gem of an idea, I think it's time to outline. So I'm going to be presenting 3 different outlines that I have used that have varying degrees of intensity. So we're going to be starting out very, very, very basic for all my pantsers out there. So if you're not sure what type of writer you are, think about whether before you start writing, you need to know every single detail that's going to happen in the story. You need a full outline of this is exactly what is going to happen. Chances are, if that's more your bag, you're going to be a plotter. If that gives you nightmares and you just want to be able to put pen to paper or start typing and you're just going to work out what goes next, you are likely a pantser. And if you're like me, who likes to know the bare bones of the plot, you know, I like to know the beginning, the middle, the end, a little bit more detail perhaps if the story is more intricate, and then I like to fill in the gaps, you are probably a plantser, which, all these silly terms, but it does help you realize what type of outlining tool you may need. So let's pick a pantser-friendly outlining tool to begin with. This is a simple method I have used to plot many books. And actually, I used the simple method to begin with for the book that ended up getting me my agent. So in this method, we are going to do 3 simple things. We are going to identify what happens at the beginning. So what is the catapult? What is the thing that's basically the inciting incident? What is going to kick this novel off? Where is your character at the beginning of the novel, and what is the central premise at the beginning? So it can be a bullet point that you're writing here. It can be, you know, like circles along the way, whatever it is. So just write something that happens at the beginning. Then I want you to think about the midpoint. So at the midpoint, you are looking for things like a big plot twist, something that will propel your character into the second half of the story. You've got to think about them kind of hitting a wall or like hitting a barrier that stops them from achieving their goal. So what is happening at that midpoint? What challenges can you throw their way in this midpoint in order to propel them into the second end of the story and hit the climax at the end? Usually I like to actually plan the midpoint once I've worked out the beginning and the ending. And you can guess where we're going next. We're going to think about what happens at the end. So often with stories that I plan, I know the ending first. I can already see what's going to happen at the end, the feeling I want to happen at the end, like what emotion is the character going to be going through at the end. I know the very end, and sometimes I work backwards to the midpoint and backwards to the beginning. So work out what is going to happen at the very, very end. And that's it. That is your outlining tool. You know what happens at the beginning, you know what happens at the middle, and you know what happens at the end. And now it's up to you to work out what happens. So the reason why I really think this simple tool is great for outlining is because it gives you stuff to aim for. I think for pantsers, this is a really good tool. It can keep you gearing ahead in terms of, okay, I know I need to reach this right at the end. I know I need to reach this in the middle. So I'm going to just have fun along the way, type happily until I can get my characters at this point. I think plotting out those key beats, the beginning, the middle, the end, you know, hopefully if you are a pantser, you should be able to at least do that. And then you've got so much freedom to be able to carry your way through the book. I've had the experience where, because I am such a pantser, things just haven't worked out like that. And the story has kind of had a mind of its own and has gone in a complete opposite direction. Now, when this happens, don't panic. I sometimes think this is like meant to happen. And sometimes, you know, you can hit the midpoint and you can work out that your outline maybe wasn't a good outline, and maybe that isn't the best thing that's happening in the story because you're actually writing it and experiencing it now, and actually you kind of have visualized something else. You can write a new outline halfway through your book. Like, you can work out a new ending if you thought of something better. So I think bear that in mind. Like, it doesn't need to be that rigid. If you are scared of outlining, just kind of giving yourself a guide of where you want to hit those 3 points and go from there. And now we're going on to our next outline, the 3-act structure. Now, chances are you will have heard of this outlining tool. I've used this in every single one of the novels I have plotted, essentially. I even divide my stories, like as I am writing them on Scrivener, I'll divide them into a 3-act structure. So Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then usually I will put kind of like 9 chapters per act. I just hope that gives me a bit of a guideline as to just the shape of my story, like what I'm aiming for. So the 3-act structure is a narrative model that divides a story into 3 parts: the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. It's a very popular tool in screenwriting as well, so a lot of writers do favor this method. So here's some details about the 3-act structure. So Act 1, you've got the setup or exposition. So this really is where the main characters and their goals are established. So in this act, you have the inciting incident. So something that happens that is going to change the character's course and set them off in your story. Then we have Act 2, and this is where the stakes are really raised. The hero and the villain confront each other, or you've got some just big plot twists. Basically, ascending action. You want, as you can see by this kind of chart I've put up here, you can see the ascending action and several obstacles along the way. This is also where you have your midpoint. Your midpoint needs to have a nice big twist, something shocking that's going to propel the characters into the second half of the story. And in the later half of Act 2, this is where you have your darkest night of the soul, it's called, or your crisis, your disaster, something so shocking that you're like, how are the characters going to get out of this? This is towards the end of Act 2. And in the 3-act structure method, the second act is always the biggest in terms of bulk of your writing is probably going to be in the second act. Then finally, we have Act 3. This is where the story is resolved and the hero has gone through their transformation. They have changed. They have discovered something new about themselves. They have overcome their obstacles. This is where the action is descending. And towards the end of Act 3, you have your resolution, your wrap up, but also you could also end Act 3 on a plot twist. You could end it on a cliffhanger. Whatever you kind of sense is the right ending for your story. You know, you can end that in however way you want it, but ultimately the reader does need some conclusion. They need something to be finalized and wrapped up, like the main story to be rounded off nicely. So that is the 3-act structure. And I really like this model. And how I outline using this method, as I've been demoing on screen, I actually write what happens at each of the beats. I really like doing this because it actually helps me think, what twist can I add in here? What twist can I add in here? It gives my story some shape. And I think this is really in the middle between a plotter and a pantser's model. This is the perfect pantser model because there is enough detail here to craft a story, but there is not too much detail that you can't have fun and fill in the blanks, you know? I'm a big fan of this method, and I've used this to craft many of my stories. Now, for my final of my 3 outlining methods, which I absolutely have adored recently. I have been using this method so much. And this method you might have heard of. It is called the Save the Cat beat sheet. So, for more intricate plots, or plots where I just need more detail, I need more kind of like ways to plot out what's going to happen in a lot more detail, I use this method. And I actually am using this method for my current work in progress. So I am about 60,000 words through the first draft of a new novel, and I use Save the Cat to outline this at the beginning. So where you have like multiple points of view, where you have intricate fantasy worlds or any intricate, you know, plotting points, so like a thriller or something like that, I would really recommend Save the Cat. It actually breaks the previous outlining tool that we mentioned, the 3-act structure tool, into 15 key sections or beats. So this is an example of what the Save the Cat beat sheet looks like. In Act 1, like the 3-act structure, bear in mind this is exactly still a 3-act structure, you just have more beats along the way to really help you plot in what you need to make this story incredible. Now, what I really love about this is that you can see this structure implemented in so many films, in so many TV shows, in so many books. So in Act 1, we obviously have our kind of beginning. We have our inciting incident. They're calling this like the catalyst. You also have things like the setup, the theme stated, the debate, and then you have the break into Act 2. So I really like how each of these is plotted, and you can also find explanations of what each of these beats means in terms of your story online. Then we have Act 2, so of course, first thing you're seeing here is your midpoint. You've got fun and games just before the midpoint. Now I really love this because it's reminding you to add in some light, add in some brevity, add in some humor. You want to add in a part of the plot that isn't so heavy. You just want the characters to enjoy themselves for a little bit. We'll give them that. There's also something called the B story in here. Working in other points of view, working in other plot lines, working in other things your character is maybe focusing on. Because yes, you want that main plot to be the main thing that's going on. You also want a very layered picture. A story can't be just straightforward. There has to be some intricacies to it, and that's what I think this structure does really well, is to remind you about the intricacies of every story. Then towards the second part of Act 2, you have something called the Dark Night of the Soul. Now I love the fact that it's called this because, you know, we all have seen movies, TV shows, read books where the characters are lost. They have given up, and this is their Dark Night of the Soul moment where they have to make a decision. And all great stories have this, where the characters decide to fight back, or they find a little bit of hope to just break them into that Act 3, to break them into the climax, and to take them towards that finale in Act 3. So I really love Save the Cat. I think it's really fun. And how I outline using Save the Cat is I actually plot out everything that happens along these beats. So the character starts off here. Maybe she'll do this, maybe she'll do this. And I actually write what my characters do at each step of the Save the Cat structure. I also think if you have got multiple points of view, if you've got multiple plot strands going on, take a different color pen and write out what happens in each of their journeys along the way, just so you can create that layering. You can create that like multi-dimensional plot that runs along. You want to show off the different plot threads and also include your character arcs here. So maybe you can put in a different color pen, like what the character is feeling, you know, what they're going through. I find all of that really, really helpful. So those are the 3 outlining tools I've suggested that I've used before, that I can vouch for. And there are so many different outlining tools out there, but I just want to make a disclaimer that this is my way of how I outline. I know some of you guys might have different tools that you use, but this video today is really giving you a sense of like how I do it. So what happens once you have marked out all of your beats using one of these outlining tools? So for when I have a more intricate plot and more intricate story that I'm working on, I will actually go one step further than this. And this is something that I have done during my current work in progress, where once I have outlined using one of these methods, I write out 1-sentence summaries for every single chapter in my book. Now, this happens a little bit further down the line. Like, this is basically just before I'm ready to start writing, because like, for me, I have to know the story already. Sometimes I might have even started the story already, and this is me kind of like, okay, I feel confident to know what happens at every single step along the way. So also using this tool of writing 1-sentence summaries for each chapter is really helpful when it comes to your querying process. So if you do want to get an agent, this is also really helpful because it just basically helps you write your synopsis of what happens in the story. And these 1-sentence summaries help me know what I'm aiming for. You will see later on in this video, I show you how I outline on Scrivener, which is a writing tool, a piece of writing software that I vouch for. And I have a way of doing this on Scrivener that tells me exactly when I open a new chapter, exactly what's going to happen in that chapter, and it is great. I really, really love doing this because there is something already on the page, and that is so nice when it comes to writing. You kind of feel like, oh, I have a blank page in front of me and I have nothing to do. So either I will write out in a notebook what happens in each chapter, or I will create those chapters on Scrivener and I'll actually type in what happens on every single chapter page. So let me show you guys my Scrivener process. This is how I outline on Scrivener. I do have a full Scrivener tour. I am planning on pulling together a full Scrivener tour because so many of you guys have asked for one, and even though I feel like I don't use it to its full potential, I do have a way of using it that I'm really loving at the minute. So this is one of the ways that I use Scrivener, and it is for outlining. It is so great for outlining. Let me just show you guys exactly how I use it. Okay, so when you open your Scrivener project, if you haven't bought Scrivener, by the way, I really would recommend it if you are a writer and you're looking for a tool that's got a lot more kind of like techniques to it than Microsoft Word, for example. It is really a writing tool that I have used for every single one of my novels. So when you open Scrivener, you will find this project templates pop up. You've got a list of things that you could write down here. I always click on fiction. This is where you've got a novel with parts, and I always use novel with parts to create a template. So let's say this is, I don't know, a story about a female knight. We're gonna use this, okay? Female knight story, let's go. So here we go. That has opened up a template for us on Scrivener, and this is how I would start outlining using Scrivener. At this point, I already have an idea, so we're really going off the cuff with my imagination here, so bear with me. Anyway, I tend to ignore this, I'll be honest. I just like get rid of this novel format thing, put it in the trash. So you've got part here and part here. Now, I love 3 parts. I like 3 acts, and then you would create an extra folder here. So this is gonna be, let's say, Act 1, you've got Act 2, you've got Act 3. So, as you can see here, this is broken down into chapters and scenes. I don't like including this like chapter folder. I would just basically create these scenes and move them out. So these are going to be each of my chapters, and I would actually get rid of this chapter folder. Now, I would be populating this Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 with my 9 chapters. Say I'm doing kind of a 3-act structure and I'm doing 9 chapters per part. You know, I'd kind of be like, this is going to be chapter 3, this is going to be chapter whatever. So this is how I would first set up my Scrivener project. This is the great thing about Scrivener, guys. There is this little thing here, characters. So we can add new from template, a character sketch. Now this is actually incredible, and I have used it for my most recent novel and absolutely adored this character tool. You can pop in your character name here. So let's say her name is Lila Stone. This is me just completely making this up as we go along. She is 27 and she lives in a mythical location. We're going to call it Hearthstone. Let's just go with that. Now roll in story. So this is where I just really start filling this out. So she is going to be the protagonist of our story. She is going to be a knight of the realm, and she is going to be a secret princess in hiding. Now, these are the important bits, the goal, like what is her goal in the story? And her goal is to reclaim her kingdom, of course. But then she has another goal. Maybe she also has a goal to be the best knight. So she's obviously in hiding maybe, and she is hiding her birth, but she also has a goal to be super strong and be the best knight she can be, to really like defy the, I don't know, like the patriarchy in terms of like, maybe she's the only female knight. Sure, we'll do that. Then of course you've got physical description, personality, occupation, habits and mannerisms. This one's really important actually, because I think, as I mentioned earlier in this video, having mannerisms that the character's known for, is that your character does, say they're on edge or say they're anxious. Like, what do they do when they're anxious? Like, little details like that really help your characterization. So I would work through all of these, and then I would go on to places. Now, in places, you have new from template and then a setting sketch. Now, this is equally as important. So the name of the setting, what did I call that in the character sketch? Hearthstone, we're gonna call this. So sure, we're gonna start drafting Hearthstone. Not Hearthstone, Hearthstone. Okay, location. So what's the kingdom called? Where is it in its kingdom? Maybe the kingdom's called Ream, and it is the capital city. The role in the story, so maybe this is where our character is born. Birthplace of the character. You know, maybe it is at war with a rival nation, and as the capital city, Hearthstone has the center of the war strategy. You could say something like that. So yes, and then obviously on this setting sketch, you have loads of other details that will help you really flesh out your setting and your world. So as I mentioned, sights, sounds, smell, you know, unique features about it, the season, all of this is so important when you're outlining and putting together an idea of what your setting might be like. This is how I actually outline, guys. So once I have used one of my outlining methods, which you will have seen, I always start off on paper for those. Now that I've got a sense of where my story's heading, my beginning, my midpoint and my end, and maybe more detail if I've used Save the Cat or something like that, I will go into the folder of Act 1. And you can see here that there's little kind of like post-it shaped, you know, kind of cards for each of my chapters. What you can do, and this is so amazing, I love this so much, you can write on these. So this won't actually appear. So say I'll have written in chapter 1, Lila Stone is an undercover princess disguised as a female knight. Okay, that is where we find our main character in the story. You won't find this in this chapter. This is where you are going to be writing your chapter 1, and you know, you'll be cracking on with your beginning. But we have got an idea of exactly what happens in each chapter. You know, so, you know, you can start to really just summarize what happens at every single stage of your novel. Here we go. So she duels with an enemy knight in chapter 2. And you can do this for your entire novel. And I love that. And then say you get into Act 2, you can do the exact same. So you can add new text here, and you can literally be like, what is my midpoint going to be? She is forced to abscond from the city. As you can tell, I'm just really making the story up from the top of my head. But this is how I outline in Scrivener. I love it so much. Sometimes what I'll even do, and what I've really done for my current work in progress, is I obviously have these blank pages to be writing. But then what I will do is I will build in exactly what happens on the pages as well. Of course, I have what happens in each of these like chapter cards in my Act 1 overview. As I mentioned, like there's nothing worse than a blank page. So maybe I'll even just copy that one-line sentence. You know, I'll copy that and I'll actually put that into chapter 2 as well. And what I'll do is I'll pop that at the bottom, just so when I'm finishing chapter 1, like writing, I finish that chapter, I'll go into chapter 2, and I'll know exactly what I need to write in that chapter. And it's not like revelatory, it's not new. This isn't a really clever way of doing it. It's just how my brain operates. And I don't know, I just thought it might be helpful for you guys to see exactly what I do on Scrivener. So to close this video out, I wanted to just give you some of my top outlining tips and tricks that you can really implement when you're next outlining your next novel. So a reminder, these are just the tools that I have used and have brought me the most success. I haven't really tried loads of other outlining methods because I know how my brain works and I know what's right for me. You have to experiment with as many different outlining tools, read different books, watch different creators' videos, and find a method that really works for you. It's also worth saying that you can use each of these outlining tools, so that 3 kind of like beginning, midpoint, ending method, the save the cat, the 3-act structure, whatever it is. You can fill these out with as much detail as you want. You can start out with like a 3-act structure method or save the cat, and you can turn that into a full draft 0 outline. You know, you can literally write exactly what happens, and lots of authors do this. They actually don't bother like writing the novel. They kind of just put out exactly what happens, and that's their draft 0, and then they rewrite that as if they're like writing it, if that makes sense. You're just kind of dumping everything onto the page, and that's also really effective for a lot of people. I think the key thing about outlining is always make it as exciting as it can be. Add in those plot twists where your outlining method says you need them. Like, make them as dramatic and as impactful as it can be. My final piece of advice is really based around characters again. You are not supposed to make this story easy for your characters. There is no fun in reading about a character who nothing really happens to them. They've just had an easy ride. Like, nobody thinks that's going to be fun. I would really recommend putting them through their paces, throwing the most unexpected, awful things at them. And you can go down the George R. R. Martin route of like killing your darlings and just completely killing everyone. Or you can put them through more emotional turmoil. You can make things just difficult. You know, if they're trying to reach somewhere, if it's a quest story or kind of like a journey story, make them go the long way around. Don't make them take the shortcut. Do you know what I mean? Like, throw obstacles in their path and make them think of ways to get out of it. And if you really know your characters, if you've done those character sheets that I recommend on Scrivener, if you've interviewed your characters, if you know exactly how they tick, then you will know how they will try and get out of those situations as well. So those are my top tips, and I really hope this video has been interesting and helpful. With these writing videos, like, the #1 thing that makes me so happy, and it's kind of the reason why I keep putting writing content up on YouTube, is because I've had so many comments saying you have found it helpful. And that's so important to me, like, just to be able to share what I've learned, like from being in the publishing industry, but also being a writer and a prospective author. Like, I am trying to become an author myself, so I know how difficult it is. And if this video has even been remotely helpful for you, please do consider subscribing, giving this video a thumbs up, and showing your support in the comments below. It really means the world. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I document a lot more of my kind of day-to-day woes on there, of writing, and all sorts of shenanigans of working in publishing and living in London as well. So you can find me at BookBellReads on TikTok and on Instagram. And I will see you very, very shortly in a new video, guys. Thank you so, so much for watching this, and I'll see you soon. Bye.